This video is going to deal with the patterns and relationships of comparison and contrast. These words are often used together. However, they mean different things. Both of them require a minimum of 2 details. So that is the beginning. You know that you have potential comparison or potential contrast if you have 2 details. But then again, with 2 details, you might have addition or time order or, emphatic order. There's a lot of different patterns you can have with 2 details. So then what is different about comparison and what is different about contrast happening between those 2 details? Let's start with contrast because it's actually more popular. We use it so much. It seems counterintuitive. You would think that if somebody's trying to describe something, they would tell you what it's like. But in fact, we often say what it's not like. And by drawing that contrast of difference, people can understand what it is by what it's not. So contrast, if you didn't notice already, deals with the difference between those 2 details. And I say details mostly for relationships within and relationships between. Of course, if you're doing organizational pattern, the entire passage, all the details would have to be showing a dominant way of talking about contrast between all the details. So it's talking about a difference. It could be an opposition. So the 2 things could be opposite of each other, or it could even be a change. So there could be a time element, because if you think about it, change is really starting with time order, but one thing happened and later something else happened, but then instead of time order, it gets upgraded to contrast because over that time span, something is different. So if you see any kind of change over time, it's now a contrast, especially if the author's trying to emphasize, oh, look how different things are now. So the emphasis on the difference, not on the now. All right, so if contrast is difference, what's comparison? Similarity. It's not how things are opposite, but it's how things are alike. And it wouldn't be how things change, it would be how things are or stay the same. So you could possibly have time order that then is actually really comparison if an author's talking about one thing in time and later that thing is still around and it has not changed. If the author's emphasizing there not being a change, then you got to pick comparison as opposed to time order because they're emphasizing the similarity that has lasted. All right, so these are what the 2 mean. What words can we use? What will be our clue words for contrast and our clue words for comparison? Again, I'm going to start with contrast. Now, here's where those of you who are in or have taken prep writing have a huge advantage, or if you did well in that class, because there's certain words that you would have used in there to create compound sentences, to create complex sentences with the introductory fragments, the fanboys, the subordinating conjunctions that actually create these relationships within and between. All right, so there's a whole list of words that mean something is different. The ones that you will often see at the beginning of a sentence are although, even though, or though, and sometimes while. Now the word while can be used for time order as well. While would be one of those time order words where I was talking about in the second video, that time order can actually be things happening simultaneously. So while I was doing this video, my phone kept beeping. So me doing the video didn't make the phone beep, but they happened at the same time. And it's not a contrast. The making of the video isn't like, I'm not trying to emphasize how it's different from the beeping. They just happened at the same time. But this while would be trying to emphasize a difference. So for this while to actually be a contrast while, I would have to show there to be something unexpected. So I would have to say, while I was hungry, I did not get to eat. Now, you see, being hungry means you want to eat. And then when you say you didn't eat, it goes against, its opposite of what you would expect to happen. So the while can be a contrast. It's just we would have to look at what the actual details are to know if it is a contrast. All these words, these are called subordinating conjunctions. Now that's not something you really need to memorize for this class, but this class, like I've mentioned, connects a lot with prep writing. So if you do know the terminology, it only enhances your learning in both classes to make these connections when we can. And so one step further, subordinating conjunctions are the words that go with a DC. So if you have a DC, IC, you're going to have one of those words at the beginning of it. You're going to know that you're going to have one thing in the beginning contrasted with one thing in the IC. All right, but enough of prep writing. Let's go back to some other words that mean contrast. There are two, but, and sometimes, most of the time, yet. That means something is different. These are actually called coordinating conjunctions. They are two of those famous fanboys, say that fast 10 times, If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry. This is another prep writing thing. But again, if you know this, it really helps your learning in both classes. So those fanboys, but, and yet are contrast. So whatever comes before it, and usually they're like this, IC, coordinating conjunction, IC. So there's one thing, and there's two things, and they are different from one another. And the reader knows it because it has a but or a yet in between it. So, I am hungry, yet I can't eat till midnight. That's not true, but again, I'm showing how there's that opposite of what you would expect, this time using the yet. And I could do the but. I am hungry, but I have no food in the fridge. So again, there's that opposition of what you would expect would happen to take care of that hunger, and is just not there. All right, now there are words that we actually call transitions. However, in contrast, and can I think of any others? Well, at this point, I'm drawing a blank. These words in writing class and in reading class, we'll call all of these in reading class transitions, but that's kind of lazy. If we were more technical, we would only be calling this set of word transitions, and then we'd be calling these by their proper names. But again, if you're not in prep writing, don't worry about it. If you call them all transitions, you're still going to get the point, because what you're going to know is that it's contrast, that those words, and these words are contrast. So we've got these transitions. Those of you that know the sentence structure, these would be the ones that go with the semicolon before it and the comma after it. So it's that transition in between that tells the reader, this is the first part of the two details, and this is the second part. And because that word is in between them, they are different in some way. All right, so there are, they all start popping up once you start thinking about it. So I thought of unlike, so let me add that one in there too. There's probably about 30 others. I'm not going to go over every single one of them out there, but excuse me, I want to give you the idea of what contrast will look like and how the words will indicate the contrast. There aren't as many words for comparison. Comparison has, almost the same words here. Very few words. You can use the word both, and then you could talk about both this thing and this second thing, how they are the same. So there will have to be something in the detail itself with this word that lets you know that it's not just addition. They're trying to emphasize some qualities that are similar in them. Both cats and dogs have whiskers. They do, don't they? I know my dog has a few of them, not as many as cats, but the idea here is that although I did addition, both cats and dogs, what I'm emphasizing is the whiskers. So I'm pointing out the comparison between them. So that both is really a comparison clue. And I could say cats and dogs are alike in that they both have whiskers. So alike could be a word. cats and dogs are the same in that they have whiskers. So I could use that. I could actually use the word similarly, and I could use the word like dogs. Cats have whiskers. Similarities are, well, similarity. Let me put the word similarly. You could even say comparatively, but now we're getting really fancy. You probably would not say that in conversation, but that could show up in a more argumentative essay. Like I told you, there are not very many words for comparison clues. We will have to rely a little bit more on the two details and what is said about the two details, and we will probably know as much from the clue words as from our common sense that they're simply one and the same thing.